Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us. Joel, Jenny Lynn, and I were part of a panel at General Assembly on behalf of the Alliance for Mission and Renewal. And now that it's been almost a month since GA has been over, and we've been hither and yon, we thought it might be great to get back together again and just debrief a little bit together about how we felt General Assembly went. At least I know for myself, as I've gone around my congregation, different folks who've been asking me, so how was GA for you? And we thought that might be a good prompt question to ask. So, Joel, Jenny Lynn, how was GA for you?
Joel, I want to hear your thoughts before I share mine.
Yeah, I think it was an encouraging time. And how you answer that question always depends on where your vision is cast in terms of, well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the business that was conducted at GA? Are we talking about the opportunities to connect with people? Are we talking about some of the vibe within the assembly hall? Because I think my personal answer is going to vary. And I think, Sean, if I tried to push that all together in one basket, in the words of Mr. Darcy from one of the movie versions of Pride and Prejudice, I would say GA was perfectly, which kind of sounds good at first, and then you realize, like, wait, it was fine. It was mid, as my kids would say. That's my take on GA. Glad to unpack that more. But Jenny Lynn, how far are you from where I'm at?
I would say I'm right about where you are. When people have asked me how GA was, I've really focused on the connections I got to make, people I got to see. I haven't talked a lot about what happened in the assembly room, what the business looked like, because I think I feel a lot more ambivalent about that and a lot more kind of meh about that. But it was encouraging being able to catch up with some great brothers and sisters and have some of that time together, in that regard. So I was grateful for that.
Let's unpack that a little bit more. So it was meh, it was adequate. Um, my typical answer every year from General Assembly is, well, there was some good, there was some bad.
Mhm.
What were one or two things that you thought were really good, and what were one or two things that you thought were less than adequate, let's say, as opposed to bad? Um, what do you think?
One thing that was really good from my vantage point, and you guys sadly were not a part of this, we're not even invited to this, was we had a
Huh.
happy hour for women staff, women who are working in PCA churches, PCA committees, organizations, and other adjacent ministries like Surge, and came together and just spent time hanging out, getting to meet and connect with one another. And it was incredible to see. I think we had at least 50 women gathered. And just to
Wow.
see these women who are there because they love the church, like these are people who don't necessarily have to be at GA. Most of them were there by just sheer choice,
Mhm.
not because they were obligated by their jobs, but to be able to connect with one another and to see how God was at work in a variety of places and people and just different vantage points on work in the kingdom was really encouraging. So that was a highlight for me.
Yeah, I would say the Fellowship Gathering is an event that we put on every year on Wednesday evenings. So after dinner, we had a Fellowship Gathering event. Hopefully, many of you watching were invited and attended and had an opportunity at Southside Social to connect. To hear stories, to reflect on, and to think about just what's happening in the life of the church. And so that was an incredibly encouraging time for me. There's always this running into folks, some of whom I know well, and then meeting friends, people I'm meeting just for the first time, which is always very, very exciting.
Mhm.
Um, I would say on the business side, one of the encouraging things for me is that there was a transition. So Will Huss, after many years of faithful leadership of RUF, which I view as just a key part to what it means when you think broadly about the PCA. Then, if you think about General Assembly, and you don't have to go that far until you think about kind of the business side of General Assembly. And so, if I shared kind of the outside the business side, one of the business highlights for me would be this successful transition, I think, after Will Huss's years of faithful service, to see him be honored. for all of the work that he's put in, and then to see the search committee from RUF land on the recommendation of Andrew Ryan as the new coordinator, and to see Andrew navigate that process is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with both of y'all in terms of the social sides of things. Uh, our new director of discipleship, Leslie Janikowski, wasn't able to make it to the Tuesday night fellowship event with female staff because she was teaching a Bible study and got to Chattanooga late. But I was very encouraged by all the women's staff that were present, that were there out of sheer choice, that participated in this event. Hugely encouraging. The fellowship event on Wednesday night was amazing. I think it was the best one yet that I've been to. It was great to see so many hanging out with each other, and especially when Irwyn showed up, there was just a general surrounding of our friend in that time. I know for me personally, the other fellowship highlight event was it's kind of our tradition at the churches I've served for all the elders and staff, pastors, all the folks and their spouses if they came. We have dinner on Thursday night before the worship service. And so we had 15, 17 folks around the table at a local restaurant. It was just, I walked into that meeting, that dinner, kind of discouraged. Truth be told, and pretty exhausted. And at the end of the 2.5 hour meal together, I was reminded of why I do this, which is there are faithful friends, faithful partners in the gospel, women and men that I serve with, and the PCA is a good thing to fight for in that regard. And my local folks reminded me of that, which kind of takes me to some of the not so good, right? We were talking before we pressed record. For me, one of the not so good, in fact, actually pretty bad parts of General Assembly was all the things that surrounded our Mission to North America coordinator, Irwyn Ince, teaching elder Irwyn Ince. On Wednesday, the Committee of Commissioners was nearly evenly divided over recommending to the Assembly that Irwyn be reelected. And there was a lengthy floor debate on that, which to me was incredibly hurtful and I think actually damaging to our bond of trust with each other. Not to mention that it raises tons of questions on why anyone would want to be a coordinator or to have any role of leadership in the PCA if this is how we're going to be treated. But then we followed it up the next day when the M&A budget was being brought to the floor through the administrative committee, and there was debate over Irwyn's salary. There was actually a motion to cut his salary 10%, and the elder who proposed it freely admitted that this was punitive. It strikes me that there is not a single elder, ruling elder or teaching elder, if they were in Irwyn's position, where they would have wanted that to happen to themselves. I can't imagine how awful it would be for me at my annual meeting in August to have to be reelected again, to have people question my leadership in front of me, to have a motion brought from the floor to cut my salary in a punitive fashion. I can't imagine how horrific that would be if I was in issues, and yet we did that to our brother. This is not the way we ought to be. Part of AMR's one of our key values is ultimately the way we deal with one another has to be for the flourishing of the church. As one of my mentors, Bob Burns, was fond of saying, how we do things is just as important as what we do. We can reach lots of people with the gospel, but if we destroy each other in the meantime, it raises questions about how we've reached other people with the gospel. So for me, whatever good happened at General Assembly was overwhelmed by that bad, and I trust that folks from every side of the spectrum of the PCA share that wasn't the way that should have gone down, and we don't want to do that again. That was not good.
Mhm.
What about y'all?
Yeah.
What were some not so good
I,
things
I
that you
mean,
saw?
well, I feel like it's impossible to move too quickly away from that, in as much as that was something from this year's GA in Chattanooga that will stick with me. And maybe to the casual observer or someone who hasn't seen or understands a lot of General Assemblies, if we could just take a note to give some broader perspective quickly. Virtually every leader of our agencies, including our stated clerk, who maybe most is one of the most prominent kind of positions of leadership within the PCA. But if you're the MTW coordinator, if you're the president of a seminary, all of these folks, these leaders, are operating effectively on 1 year terms, right? So every year they come up for renewal, and their permanent board will make a recommendation, and then the committee of commissioners can choose to ratify that. And then it comes to the floor of the assembly. Now, for all of these positions, throughout the history of the PCA, this is almost viewed as a pro forma exercise. So there's almost this agreement. Yes, you're on a 1 year term, but I don't know that it's ever happened in the history of the PCA that someone has come up for a 1 year term, and then at some point in the process they've said no, apart from that person resigning or retiring, which usually they give advance notice of, something that Will Huss did. So we saw that go well. Maybe if I can use RUF as a positive example of when you would say, oh, that makes sense that Will Huss wasn't renewed because it was clear to everyone. So to kind of choose to debate voting yes or no when it comes to Reverend Dr. Irwyn Ince as the coordinator of M&A was in and of itself, no matter what you think about his role or that position or the person or his leadership, we can just say, I think, Sean, fairly, that this is a big step in a very different direction, just as a broad cultural thing. That when you choose to stand up and enter into debate over something that maybe the average person's understanding would be, wait, the board has said we want Dr. Ince to continue. And then even the committee of commissioners, while it's debated, still ratified that decision. And then for it to make it to the floor and say, okay, let's debate it here, that was just a bit of a departure from precedent, from culture, from norms. Now, I'm not saying that made it wrong. It just was startling. That's part of what made it jarring to me, being around the PCA for a number of years and participating in General Assembly. So maybe that's helpful if someone says, I don't get it, that it was up for a vote, you voted. Isn't that how it usually goes? The short answer is no, that's not how it usually goes. And if I hear you right, Sean, you're saying, I hope it doesn't go that way again.
Part of the reason why that Bob Burns is saying is so important to me, how we do things is just as important as what we do, is because it's how we do things. That's where the gospel gets lived out.
Yeah.
Treating one
Mhm.
another as not just image of God, but treating one another as sisters and brothers in Christ, treating one another as beloved children of our common Heavenly Father, so that we would never want to bring shame upon another or bring harm upon another. Um, you know, the next generations, they are watching. And if as the Apostle Paul says in Galatians 5, if we chew and bite one another, right, we ultimately are harming Christ's little ones. So as you kind of look forward to Chattanooga beyond,
Mhm.
um, uh, it's at some levels a perfectly adequate GA with that massive exception of how we dealt with Dr. Ince. What are you hoping for over the next months as we look towards Louisville and next year? Thoughts on that? Concluding words?
A prayer for all of the stated clerks who now have like 13 various items that they have to get out to their presbyteries to vote on. Like there's like a massive amount of BCO changes, among other things, that now will go to presbyteries to take up as business. That's an important part of the productive side. There are two study committees that we can be praying for, who are going to do work on Christian nationalism as well as the directory of worship. And so I think that, in some ways you can be really encouraged by the church as we move into the next year. I was encouraged on the whole. I think by the work and business that was done. I think there's this open question of how we can choose to try to treat one another in every venue. In every venue. So whether that's in one-on-one conversations in hallways, whether that's in debate from the floor, um, whether that is online, on podcasts, on social media, I think the church, the PCA as a whole, has a real option here. We can become more like the culture in how they are taking up avenues to express, to vent, to think out loud, or we can stand and embody the Christian ethic of loving one another as we want to be loved, or following in Jesus's pattern of love, which doesn't mean, and I want to be clear about this, it doesn't mean that there's no debate. It doesn't mean that we don't try to pursue truth. For sure, those things are should be exactly what we're after, but how we do that matters. And so my hope as we look to the next year, that as we have a choice collectively as a church to do that, that we will choose to be a distinctive witness in a time where you will see frustrations boil over in ways that we wouldn't think embody the Christian ethic of how we love one another. I would love to see us, starting with AMR Exec Board, with those who follow AMR, and with others, to try to embody that as we continue forward.
Jenny Lynn, you get the last word.
Oh man, I think one thing that was encouraging to me at GA, and I think this came especially at the panel that we were all part of, was I think there are people who want to listen and want to slowly and carefully and humbly really figure out how to move forward well and how to sit in disagreement well, and how to learn and listen to people with differing views. I think we saw that in the response to our video discussion on the overtures with Joel and three men who came at things from different angles, but really were able to talk together with one another, enjoy. It seemed like you guys were enjoying that time with one another, even. And there were moments of laughter on the assembly floor, even amidst these debates. And I think the more that we can seek to do that, the more that we can seek to listen, to be curious, to have hearts of humility and be quick to repent, the more that we can cultivate that, I think the more that we have the opportunity to really grow and reflect the gospel and continue to see the flourishing of the church as we go forward, and then the flourishing of the communities around us as well.
Well, that's a great way to conclude, because that's exactly what AMR is working for. We're working for the flourishing of God's people, rooted in the gospel of grace. And so, friends, thank you for joining us on this panel. Thank you for watching. Hope you will join us for future video segments that we're producing. Please do check out our website, where there's lots of resources that you can find there. Thank you. We're glad that you were with us.